Have you ever found yourself, really clinging to an old item? Maybe a slightly too worn pair of jeans or that dated phone you keep meaning to replace?
Or even a stock, right? Something that's clearly seen better days.
Exactly. And you stubbornly believe it's worth more than anyone else would actually pay for it.
Oh yeah, it's a very common feeling, that sort of deep-seated reluctance to let go.
Well, what if I told you this isn't just, sentimentality playing tricks on you?
Ah, you're talking about the endowment effect.
Precisely. It's this powerful cognitive bias. And in this deep dive, we're going to unpack why we consistently seem to overvalue what we own simply because it's ours.
We'll explore the surprising psychological roots behind it.
Yeah, and how it subtly influences, pretty much everything, from our personal finances
To global markets even.
Right. And most importantly, we want to arm you with some, practical strategies to maybe outsmart this bias for smarter decisions and honestly, maybe for your mental well-being too.
Definitely. It can be quite stressful hanging on to things.
So let's start right at the beginning. What exactly is the endowment effect? You mentioned it, but let's define it.
Okay, so it's this really intriguing pattern where people often demand significantly more money to give up an object
Okay.
than they themselves would be willing to pay to acquire that very same object if they didn't already have it.
Wow. So there's a gap there, a big gap sometimes.
A huge gap. Yeah, it's a core concept in behavioral economics. Richard Thaler, he first really identified it. And what's crucial to understand is it's not about the objective market value.
It's not about what eBay says it's worth.
Not entirely, no. It's about this subjective inflation of worth that happens almost automatically once ownership is established.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Think about, there's this classic example of a wine-loving economist. He bought some Bordeaux years ago for, say, $10 a bottle. Cheap.
Nice buy.
Very nice. Now, today, that same bottle could fetch maybe $200 at auction.
Big difference.
Huge. So he drinks it sometimes, enjoys it. But here's the kicker. He would not sell a bottle for $200.
Even though that's the market price.
Right. And he also wouldn't buy an additional bottle at that $200 price.
Huh. So he values it more than $10, clearly, because he drinks it, but less than $200 because he wouldn't buy more. Yet he won't sell it for $200 either.
Exactly. His ownership has completely sort of distorted his valuation, even for something with a pretty clear market price.
That's fascinating. It makes you wonder, right? If he wouldn't buy it for $200 now, why is he holding on to it when he could pocket a $190 profit? It feels illogical.
It does seem that way.
Or maybe a more relatable example for many of us, trying to sell your old laptop.
Oh, definitely.
You bought it for, say, $1,000. It's still in decent shape, you think. So you list it online for maybe $900, feeling like you're being pretty generous.
Yeah, you think that's a fair price.
And then what happens? You get these lowball offers, right? $400, maybe $600 if you're lucky.
And it's frustrating.
Totally. Because for you, it's your laptop. It's got, I don't know, perceived value, maybe memories attached.
Files, yeah. Work you did on it.
Right. But for the buyers, it's just another used electronic device. They don't have that connection.
That gap you feel, that difference in perceived value, that's the endowment effect right there in action.
And this isn't just anecdotal, right? There's actual experimental proof.
Oh, absolutely. It's been shown again and again in experiments. There's a classic study where researchers just randomly gave coffee mugs to some participants.
Just handed them out?
Yep, free mug.
Yeah.
Then they asked those people how much they'd sell the mug for. On average, they demanded around $4.75.
Okay.
But then they asked other people, potential buyers, who didn't get a free mug, how much they'd be willing to pay for the exact same mug. They were only willing to pay about $2.25.
Well, it's less than half. Just because one group happened to possess it, even accidentally.
Precisely. The mere act of possession, even temporary accidental possession, created this significant value gap.
So that really begs the question, doesn't it? Why? Why does simply owning something have such a profound impact on how we perceive its value? What's going on psychologically?
Well, at its heart, the endowment effect seems to be rooted in two really deep human psychological tendencies.
Okay, what are they?
The first one, and arguably the most crucial, is something called loss aversion.
Loss aversion. Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a big concept from Kahneman and Tversky. Basically, the pain or, the disutility of giving something up is felt much more intensely.
More intensely.
Yeah, studies suggest maybe even twice as intensely than the pleasure or utility you get from acquiring something of equal value.
So losing $10 feels worse than finding $10 feels good.
Exactly. We're just fundamentally wired to fear losses more than we value equivalent gains.
Okay. And how does that connect to the endowment effect?
Well, this disproportionate fear of loss can lead to what's called psychological inertia. Kind of paralyzes our decisions to sell or let go, even when it's logically the smart move, maybe for our finances or even just our mental well-being.
Because the thought of the loss looms larger than the potential gain?
Precisely. It creates a really significant mental barrier.
So it's not just about the item itself, the mug or the laptop, but the intense internal feeling of giving something up. Is the value almost entirely in our perception of losing it?
That's a fantastic way to put it. And it leads directly into the second key tendency, psychological ownership.
Psychological ownership. So not just legal ownership.
No, it goes way beyond just having the receipt or the legal title. It's the emotional investment we make in what we perceive as ours.
The feeling that it's mine.
Exactly. And this attachment, this feeling, can deeply cloud our judgment. It makes us favor the status quo, just keeping things as they are.
How does that work? Is it conscious?
Often it's not. What's really fascinating is how automatic it can be. Simply owning an object, or even just feeling like you own it, can activate this unconscious association between the object and yourself, your sense of self.
Okay.
And because we generally have this intrinsic tendency towards self-enhancement, we like to feel good about ourselves and what's connected to us.
Yeah.
This self-object association then boosts the object's perceived value. It becomes part of me.
So the object borrows value from our own self-worth, in a way.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. This isn't just a mild preference. For some things, it can become a core part of our identity. Right. Think about how people sometimes introduce themselves. I'm a doctor, or I drive this kind of car, or they strongly identify with their favorite sports team.
Right. Those become extensions of who they are.
Exactly. They aren't just external things. They feel like extensions of the self. And so the thought of parting with them or having them criticized can feel almost like a personal attack. It's a really powerful internal mechanism.
Wow. And you said this isn't just adult humans.
No.
Yeah.
What's really surprising is that research has found the endowment effect in children who are way too young to understand economic ideas like market value.
Really? Like toddlers?
Yeah. And even in non-human primates. Studies have shown it in chimpanzees and capuchin monkeys too.
Monkeys feel loss aversion over a grape they possess.
Apparently so. It suggests this bias is incredibly fundamental, perhaps evolved, really rooted in how we interact with the world and, well, our stuff.
That is remarkable, and seeing how deep it runs, it makes sense then how this bias can cascade into much larger areas of our lives.
Absolutely.
It plays out in some really surprising ways, far beyond just personal belongings. You mentioned it impacting our financial health, maybe our careers, even our overall mental state.
Indeed. Let's look at a few areas. Take trading and investing. It's a classic example. Traders very frequently overvalue the stocks or other assets they already own.
Just because they own them.
Right. This leads to this stubborn reluctance to sell, even when, all the market indicators, the charts, the news clearly suggest they probably should.
They're holding on to losers too long.
Exactly. And it's not just about the money they might be losing as the asset declines. It's also about the missed opportunities, the opportunity costs.
Ah, right. The money tied up in that bad stock could be doing better somewhere else.
Precisely. Holding on to an underperforming asset means that capital isn't available for potentially better investments. And that indecision, that watching a stock fall while feeling unable to act, can create a lot of stress and anxiety for people.
I can imagine. Okay, what about in business?
Well, think about businesses and their pricing strategies, especially maybe in software, like SaaS companies. Product teams, they pour months, maybe years, into developing features.
Right, a lot of effort.
A ton of effort.
Yeah.
So they inherently start to overvalue those features compared to what customers are actually willing to pay for them.
They got sweat equity in it.
That's exactly the term, the sweat equity trap.
Yeah.
There's this fixation on internal costs and effort rather than on the value perceived by the customer.
And that leads to?
Often it leads to overpricing, which obviously can harm sales and stunt business growth. Adobe's big shift to a subscription model a while back.
Yeah, that was controversial at first.
It was. But one interesting side effect was it forced them to continuously justify the value to customers, month after month. They couldn't just rely on that initial sunk cost feeling. It arguably helped counteract their own internal overvaluation and focus more on ongoing customer value.
That's a neat point. So it forced an external check on their internal bias.
In a way, yes.
And okay, bringing it back home. This bias really shows up vividly in our everyday lives, doesn't it? Like making it so hard to declutter our homes.
Oh, absolutely.
I have to admit, I've got this drawer full of old charging cables for phones I don't even own anymore. And I can't seem to part with them. It's baffling.
And you know why, right? That's the endowment effect.
Yeah.
Those cables are yours, even if they're objectively useless now.
It feels wasteful to throw them out, even though they're just taking up space.
Exactly. And items with actual sentimental value. Forget about it. They're perceived as far more valuable than their actual market worth, making them incredibly hard to part with.
Which can lead to overwhelming clutter.
Right. Feeling stuck, buried under stuff.
Yeah.
Which definitely impacts our mental well-being. It can be a source of low-level stress.
And it's not just small things. Selling a family home, for example.
Oh, that's a huge one. It can be such a psychologically draining process. Your perceived value, which is all wrapped up in years of memories, emotional investment, raising kids.
It feels priceless in a way.
It does. But that often clashes, sometimes dramatically, with the actual market reality, what someone else is willing to pay.
And trying to bridge that gap.
The mental effort required to reconcile those two vastly different valuations can be immense. It takes a real toll.
You know, listening to all this, you might think this bias is just universal, a fundamental part of human nature, maybe.
That's what researchers thought for a long time. Most of the early work on the endowment effect was done in Western cultures, North America, Europe.
Okay.
But more recent studies have revealed something really fascinating. There seems to be a significant cultural difference.
Oh. How so?
The endowment effect is found to be substantially smaller in many East Asian cultures compared to Western cultures.
Smaller, like they don't overvalue their stuff as much.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Researchers replicated those classic experiments, like with the coffee mugs or sometimes chocolate boxes, in places like Japan or China. And the gap between selling price and buying price was much narrower, sometimes even non-existent.
Wow. Why? Why the difference? Do we know?
Well, the leading theory links it to differences in what psychologists call self-controls, how people perceive themselves in relation to others.
Self-controls. Okay.
So Western cultures tend to emphasize independent self-controls. The focus is more on individual identity, uniqueness, personal attributes.
Right. Individualism.
Exactly. And this tends to go along with a focus on self-enhancement, wanting to see oneself and things associated with oneself in a positive light. This self-enhancement tendency seems to fuel a larger endowment effect. We value our stuff more because it reflects positively on us.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about East Asian cultures?
They tend to emphasize more interdependent self-controls. Identity is often defined more by relationships, group harmony, social context.
Collectivism, sort of.
Sort of, yeah. And culturally, there's often less emphasis on self-enhancement and sometimes even a tendency towards self-criticism as a way to improve or fit in better.
Ah, interesting.
And this difference, this lack of strong self-enhancement drive, seems to result in a smaller, sometimes even negligible endowment effect. There's less psychological need to boost the value of things just because they're mine.
That cultural difference is really fascinating. So does that mean, if East Asian cultures are less prone to this, does that imply a different relationship maybe with material wealth? Or even personal identity? Is there something maybe we in the West could learn from that?
It certainly suggests a different relationship with possessions, perhaps less emotional attachment and maybe less resistance to change.
And do we see that play out in the real world?
There's some evidence that suggests we do. For instance, looking back around 2010, data showed that about 84% of Japanese households had high-definition TVs.
Okay.
Compared to only about 53% in the U.S. at that same time.
Faster adoption.
Seems like it. Similarly, other data suggests the average age of cars and even houses tends to be lower in Japan than in the United States.
So people replace things more readily.
It points that way. It could suggest a tendency to update and embrace new things more quickly, possibly because there's less emotional drag from older possessions. And that, of course, can have significant economic implications, driving consumption and innovation, perhaps.
Okay, so putting this all together, if the endowment effect is this powerful, often unconscious force messing with our valuations and decisions, how can you, the listener, try to mitigate its impact? How can we make more objective, maybe more profit-driven, or just, healthier decisions?
It definitely takes conscious effort. It's a bias, right? So it happens automatically.
Yeah.
But there are clear strategies you can employ.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, and this is key, set objective goals. Before emotion can creep in and cloud your judgment, define clear criteria for buying or selling.
Like what?
Well, for traders, it means setting specific price targets or stop losses for assets before they even buy them. For individuals, maybe before you even list that old laptop, decide what price is truly acceptable to you, trying to be objective, independent of your ownership or how much you wish you could get.
Detach emotionally beforehand.
Try to, yes. Second, implement discipline strategies. It's one thing to set goals, it's another to actually stick to them when the emotions kick in.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
For businesses, this might mean rigorously A/B testing different prices, using data-driven value metrics, not just gut feelings about what a feature is worth.
Right, data over intuition.
For personal decisions, like
Yeah.
decluttering, maybe you could try something like a one-in, one-out rule for possessions. When you buy something new, something old in that category has to go.
Oh, I like that. That one in, one out rule. That sounds like a really practical tip for anyone feeling overwhelmed by stuff. Helps manage the accumulation.
Exactly. It imposes a structure that counteracts the tendency to just hold on to everything. Third, actively seek external perspectives.
Get a second opinion.
Yes. Combat your own internal biases by getting objective outside views. This could be a financial advisor for investments, maybe a trading coach.
Or even just a trusted friend, right? Someone who isn't emotionally invested in your stuff or your decisions.
Definitely. A friend who can say, honestly, that old coat looks pretty worn out. Or, are you sure holding on to that stock is the best idea right now? For businesses, things like customer advisory boards or dedicated pricing committees can serve a similar function, bringing in that market reality check.
Okay, objective goals, discipline strategies, external perspectives. What else?
Fourth, practice regular rebalancing. Periodically review your assets. And this applies not just to stocks, but maybe even your physical possessions.
How you?
Ask yourself this powerful question. If I didn't already own this, would I buy it today at its current price or value?
Ooh, that's a good one. That really cuts through the attachment, doesn't it?
It forces you to evaluate it based on its current merit, not past ownership. Realigning with current realities, not just your perceived personal value from owning it, is crucial. It helps you make smarter choices and avoid that psychological burden of holding on to things you don't truly need or that no longer serve you well.
That's a very practical question to ask. Are there any sort of mental tricks we can use too?
Yes, actually. Here's one. Try to pre-commit to divestment, mentally at least.
Pre-commit.
Yeah. Before you even acquire something potentially valuable or when you're considering selling, try to mentally pre-experience the feeling of not owning it or the feeling of selling it at a specific price.
Visualize the loss beforehand.
Exactly. This kind of pre-framing can sometimes reduce the actual sting of loss aversion when the time comes to make the real decision. It makes it a bit easier to be rational.
Interesting, like a mental inoculation.
Kind of. And finally, perhaps the most fundamental thing, cultivate awareness. Just knowing that the endowment effect and loss aversion exist, understanding how they work, that's a powerful tool in itself.
Just being aware of the bias helps you spot it in action.
Right. Recognizing when that emotional attachment might be creeping in and influencing your choices is the absolute first step towards making more rational ones. It can improve your decision-making across the board and really foster a healthier mental approach to possessions, investments, everything.
You know, this focus on physical objects and financial assets is clear, but it raises another interesting question for our times. How does this endowment effect play out in our increasingly digital lives? Do we own our online presence, our digital creations in the same way?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really fascinating frontier, actually. The endowment effect definitely seems to apply, and it interacts with other psychological concepts like self-determination.
Self-determinate.
Yeah, our intrinsic motivation that's driven by feeling autonomous, competent, and related to others. Think about online activities like blogging, contributing to social media, maybe self-streaming on platforms like Twitch or YouTube.
Okay.
When you actively create and contribute content online, you're not just a passive consumer. You are, in a sense, co-creating that digital space.
You're building something.
Exactly. And that active involvement fosters a really strong sense of psychological ownership and also gratification in what you've built or contributed. Your profile, your posts, your videos.
Yeah.
They feel like yours.
So if I've poured hours into, say, my blog or carefully curating my Instagram feed, I'm likely to overvalue it, just like my old
Very
laptop.
likely, yes.
And then maybe if someone criticizes it, that loss aversion kicks in extra hard
Yeah.
because it feels like a criticism of me, not just the content.
Precisely. That endowment in creation, as some call it, can indeed lead to overinvestment of time and emotional energy online. And yes, it can make us highly protective of our digital creations and online identity.
And unlike physical objects, these platforms have network effects, right?
That's another layer, yes. Online platforms often benefit hugely from network effects. Their value increases as more users join, interact, and co-create.
So my contribution adds value for everyone else, too.
Right. The more individuals co-create and engage, the deeper the perceived value becomes, not just for the individual creator, but for all users. This creates a really powerful, sometimes quite binding connection with certain platforms. We feel invested.
Which also raises some tricky ethical questions, I imagine.
It really does. Questions about data privacy, about who truly owns the value created by user contributions, the ethical implications of how our endowed online efforts are used by these platforms. It highlights this complex intersection of psychology, technology, and broader societal well-being. It's an area that's still evolving rapidly, but those underlying psychological principles of ownership and loss aversion, they remain remarkably consistent online or off.
So after digging into all of this, what's the main takeaway? What does this all mean for you listening right now?
I think the main takeaway is that the endowment effect is this really powerful, often hidden force that shapes our decisions constantly. It really highlights how our emotional relationship with what we possess, whether it's tangible goods, stocks, or even our digital creations, can significantly skew our perception of value.
It's not always rational.
Not always, no.
Yeah.
So understanding this bias is just crucial if you want to make more objective choices, whether that's managing your investments better, finally decluttering your home, or even just understanding how you engage with online communities.
It's about gaining that awareness of the invisible forces playing out in our own minds.
Exactly. That awareness is vital for mental clarity and for taking effective action.
It boils down to recognizing that perceived value and actual objective value. They aren't always the same thing. And often it's our emotions, that sense of ownership and fear of loss, that are the quiet architects building that difference.
Well said.
But the good news is, by applying objective criteria, by seeking those external perspectives, maybe trying some of those mental tricks like pre-committing or asking, would I buy this now?
Yeah,
You can gain greater control.
you absolutely can.
And that can lead to better financial outcomes, sure, but also maybe less emotional burden from stuff, and ultimately just greater clarity and maybe even peace of mind.
Couldn't agree more.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Think about an item, maybe a digital creation, or even just an idea or belief you currently own. Is your emotional attachment, that sense of mine, subtly inflating its value in your mind? How might consciously adopting a different perspective, maybe the perspective of a non-owner, reshape your next decision about it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes frustrating world of the endowment effect.
We hope it gave you some useful insights.
We look forward to our next exploration with you.